question 5 in this game, or question 22 overall in the section, reads, if center 3 recycles glass, then which one of the following kinds of material must center 2 recycle? So again, we have a must be true type of question, and hopefully we can get at this via a chain of forward deductions. So what we can do is we can start with the if information that we have, and then apply the rules to see how far we can get. So the if part says, if center 3 recycles glass. So you can say, we want to write something down, just have a very easy schematic of centers 1, 2, and 3. So well, center 3 recycles glass, so we can put glass here, and then we can apply the rules to see where we can go from there. The first rule we have is that if a center recycles wood, it recycles newsprint. We don't know what to do with that yet. We have this, if something is recycled at center 2, it's recycled at center 1 rule. Don't know what to do with that either. Plastic can only show up once. Don't know what to do with that. But you notice here that at least rather than floundering, I know that I can always go at the rules in order and say, can I apply this rule? Can I apply this rule? Can I apply this rule? So in that way, you always know what to do next. And I'm eventually rewarded because by the time I get down here, I can say, well, plastic and glass cannot go together. So I can put that in my diagram here by saying, okay, plastic cannot be at center 3. Well, I also notice if I put these two rules together, that's how I got the plastic cannot be at center 2. So I can put the plastic cannot be here either. Then by process of elimination, plastic has to be at center 1. Now this tells me a number of things. Most notably because I have this rule that everything that is recycled at center 2 has to be recycled at center 1. But I know that plastic is not recycled at center 2. I know that center 2 can only have 2 things recycled at it, because then we need to have 2 more things down here, and we can have a maximum of 3 items recycled at center 1. So we just have to figure out what these guys are here. Okay? So what else can we do with our rules? We can say if a center recycles wood, then it has to recycle newsprint. Not sure what to do with that yet. We already used this rule, and we already used all these rules. So now let's think about our answer choices. Let's cross out what we know doesn't have to be true and see what we have left. So it says, which one of the following kinds of material must center 2 recycle? And then we have glass, newsprint, plastic, tin, and wood. Well, we know that plastic cannot be at center 2, so we can cross that out pretty easily as an answer choice. We can also say, well, how else can we go about this? We know that glass cannot be at center 2, simply because glass cannot be at center 1 because of plastic. And we can think about the contrapositive of this rule here, that we can write, if something is not recycled at center 1, it cannot be recycled at center 2. So it's useful to think of whether or not you write them down explicitly. And one option when you're starting the game, whenever you have an if-then statement, is to explicitly write down the contrapositive. Here we can say, well, if we know that glass is not at center 1, we also know that glass is not at center 2. So again, thinking about which one of the following kinds of material must center 2 recycle, well, glass certainly doesn't have to be an answer. But we still have 3 answer choices left. So, well, how can we think about what to do with these answer choices such that we can get to an answer confidently but without wasting too much time? Now, we could go through and we could test all of the answer choices, but that's a little bit cumbersome because we can say, how can we show that something must be recycled at center 2? We would have to show that it can't be recycled at center 3, and it can't be recycled at center 1. So by default, it would have to be at center 2. Because we've already gotten to everything in a more straightforward manner already. So if we don't see something, that's kind of the process that we have to use, right? It's called proof by contradiction, that we can say, hey, if something can't go anywhere else, it has to go at center 2. Or we could be a little bit more clever with this, and we could notice that there can only be one correct answer to a question. Here, if we were to put W as an answer to this question, that would imply that W has to be recycled at center 2. But wouldn't that also mean, based on this rule, that newsprint would have to be recycled at center 2? But we can't have two correct answers to our question, so it simply does not make sense for W to be our answer, because it has a hanger-on that must also be true if this has to be true. So that was an interesting way to get rid of an answer choice. Let's see if we can do something like that again. To further narrow down our answer choices, we can start asking ourselves, how can we think more open-endedly about this question? Because in our straightforward application of the rules, we've gotten pretty much as far as we can go, and we want to say, in what other ways can we look at this question in order to further refine our choices? And generally, a good place to start is the place that's the most restricted. So in that case, it seems like center 2 is the most restricted, because we've already ruled out two options, and we know that we have to have two materials here. So what you'll notice, because we're trying to fill these two spots, is that we have to have 2 of whatever's left over. And what we have left over is W, N, and T. Now before we even think about the rules, we notice that there are 3 different ways that we could choose 2 of W, N, and T. We could choose W and N, we could choose N and T, or we could choose W and T. Now when we start looking at our rules, we realize that not all of these work, because if W is present, N has to always be present, so WT does not work. We notice that the 2 options we have left are WN and NT. Now, although we don't know yet which one of these it has to be, we notice that the 2 options that we have left both have an N. So we actually can conclude, based on this analysis here, that N has to be at center 2. And the question asks, which one of the following kinds of material must center 2 recycle? Well, we've just shown in a forward way, by thinking a little bit more creatively about this problem, that the answer has to in fact be B, newsprint. It's also interesting to note, going back to what we said earlier in the game, that if we had skipped that earlier question asking which of the centers could recycle plastic, we would have gotten to our answer with this example in question 22. Because we do in fact have a scenario where center 1 recycles plastic. So we can conclude based on this example that plastic can be recycled at center 1, and that would have been enough information to answer the earlier question without doing any extra work. Question 6 in this game, or question 23 overall in the section, asks, if center 1 is the only recycling center that recycles wood, then which one of the following could be a complete and accurate list of the kinds of material that one of the recycling centers recycles? So again, we have a could-be type of question. And we say we can probably go at that by process of elimination, but we want to do as much as we can with the information that we're given in the question first. So here, the information we're given in the question is, if center 1 is the only recycling center that recycles wood. So we can put that in and apply the rules and see where we can go from there. So we'll say wood is recycled at center 1. Because it says center 1 is the only recycling center that recycles wood, we also want to put in that wood cannot be recycled at center 2 or center 3. So what you'll notice here is that we can start applying the rules and see what's going on. The first rule says anywhere you have wood, you have to have newsprint. That one's pretty easy to apply. That means that we put newsprint here at center 1 also. Here, say if something is recycled at center 2, it's also recycled at center 1. Now, if we approach this rule in somewhat of a creative fashion, like we've done in earlier questions, we notice that because wood has to be only at center 1, we A, have to have 3 materials recycled at center 1, and 2 materials recycled at center 2, because that's the only way that we can satisfy this rule of anything recycled at center 2 is also recycled at center 1. And what we see here is we have this sort of relationship. Well, looking at it that way, it becomes clear that newsprint and one other thing have to be recycled at center 2. You'll notice that that one other thing cannot be plastic, because plastic can never be recycled at center 2. Say, okay, plastic can only go in one recycling center. Well, if we put it at 2, we've got to put it at 1. Similarly now, if we put it at 1, we have to put it at 2 because we've established this relationship. So the only place that we can reasonably put plastic is center 3. The last rule we have to use is that plastic and glass cannot go together. So that would tell us that glass cannot go at center 3. So glass has to be the one filling these spots here, just by process of elimination. The last thing we notice is that tin has to go somewhere. And we've already filled up centers 1 and 2, so we have to put tin here. Now we were actually able to do a lot up front with this question, so answering the question should just now be a matter of going through the answer choices to see what makes sense. So the question asks, which of the following could be a complete and accurate list of the kinds of material that one of the recycling centers recycles? Okay, that seems easy enough. Choice A says plastic and tin. Oh, well, in our setup here, center 3 recycles plastic and tin. So we think that this is the answer. Let's just make sure that none of the other answer choices work. Choice B says wood and newsprint. Well, here we have wood and newsprint, but we also have glass, so this is not complete and accurate. And we don't see wood and newsprint by themselves anywhere else. So we can get rid of that answer choice. We don't see N and T by themselves anywhere, so we can get rid of that. We don't see G and W by themselves, so again, this is not a complete list, because if you have G and W, you have to have N. And we don't see G and T anywhere, so we can get rid of that as well. And just as we suspected, the correct answer choice is choice A.